else I'm missing on that?
Grapes.
Optional breaks.
Any weapons?
Oh yeah, we'll bring whatever leftover drinks we have. Except for alcohol. Gordon has arranged for us to have a nice lunch, hopefully.
Oh, nice and stuff.
I spent all morning cooking it, that's why.
So if anybody has any questions about that, ask now, or just make sure you're there at 8:30 in the morning. That's the most important. And we'll just try to have a fun time tomorrow.
Bill?
Yeah.
If anybody's concerned about breakfast at 6 o'clock in the morning, that room across from the ice cream place, down on the main floor will be open.
Okay, great.
Not the place that we've
Not
been
here.
eating so
Okay.
down the hall.
All right.
At 6, nobody's got to be.
It's called the Hoosier.
The Hoosier, that's where we have reservations for Sunday morning at, does anybody remember? 8:30. And that's just, you know, it's, if you're there, you're there. They're going to have an area for us, so we'll see if there's tablecloths. So anyway, just again, thanks everybody for coming. Appreciate it. It's the first time in a long time we've all been together, and we all keep getting bigger.
Okay, well, I get to be the leader tonight. Somebody else gets to do it tomorrow night. But first of all, I think we should all applaud Bill for keeping the email going. My mom and dad are not connected to the internet, and so they have no clue of all the things that have been going on for the last 6 months as we went through email together. But I am so glad to have it because it's brought us together in a very nice way. So thank goodness for the internet. Tonight what we want to do is do a little celebrating and about our journey with George, our travels that we've had together, and the relationships that we have made with him. You need to know that I'm going to be emotional, so, and in fact, Joe said to me, is it going to be a tearful or, I think it's going to be a lot of tears. So, we're all Italian, so we know that happens, and so feel free to let your emotions show as the night goes on. One of the things that, where did that cat?
He's crying early, so he can go.
We're celebrating 80 years around the sun. Dad's made a trip 80 times around the sun. He's completed that. That's why we have birthdays. We complete one trip around the sun and we get to celebrate the birthday. But what we're really celebrating is the relationships that we've made with you and we have with you. And so what I would to say to you tonight is a little bit about my relationship with my dad. And then if you have... Okay.
When Becky and I had our house fire, they were there, it seemed, within hours, and when our whole world was falling apart, they're the ones that made it seem like there's a future. This is only a temporary thing. And I especially remember George taking me aside and cupping my chin like he sometimes does with you. And he said something like, remember that in the worst of tragedy, there's still opportunity. And I have no idea what that means even today. But at the time, it was so reassuring, and I just love them both for their support over the years. This is a song called Hoosier Girl. It is probably more to Betty than it is to George. So what can I do about it? Change it.
Faces of my bed.
started out this little place along the state. In the rolling hills of southern Indiana. Well, in the town of Hollywood, where my friendships first occurred, with some folks I knew so well, how love I can tell. And it was southern Indiana, the first time I felt with the burning vision out in the country. I left before I leave again, just to come back to those men. You can read my adventures in the letters I send. In my heart I still know there's a place where I go, where the wild Genesee goes in the air.
If any of you want to share some of your times with what you've had experience with our father, our grandpa, our uncle, our brother-in-law, all the relationships that we have in this room, the floor is open to you.
I have one question to ask. I got to thinking about this today. I want to see a raise of hands of how many people here were joined in marriage by George St. Angelo. Wow. Can I speak? That's fine. Thank you.
Well, who's next?
Well, that's your fault.
No, I would just like to say something. George and I were together in Luxor, Egypt. Now, Betty was still back in Naperville. Gordon was on his way to Sudan. But just so the rest of you know, it's all on the up and up. I was on one of George's tours. And we were headed for, after we got off the Nile River, we were headed for the Valley of the Kings. And we were on our way to King Tut's tomb. Gee, that's hard to say. King Tut's tomb. You tried. the bus stopped. The vendors were pounding at the windows. We got off the bus. The vendors were crawling all over us. We pushed our way through, and somebody was tugging my shirt tail. I pulled to go forward. It was held a little tighter. Finally, I turned around, and it was a darling, I would say 6-year-old Egyptian girl. She said, "I make you happy." Give. No. I make you happy. Give. No. Finally, she took my arm, and she put this under her arm, and my arm, and held it tight. What could I do? I reached in my purse and brought out money. Gave it to her, and at that, I had 24 children. By this time, the police on horseback, I'm sorry to say, came along with their whips. The children vanished. And just then, in the background, way off, I hear, "Beatty, help me!" I look up, and George is on the long, sandy road to the tomb of King Tut. That's easier to say than King Tut. And I thought, George is asking my help. He's my leader. I should be helping George. And I ran up there. By this time, he had 24 children. We got him free and made our way to the tomb. But George, what I'd like to say to you is, I have found this in my drawer. Every year when I clean drawers, desk drawer. And I look at it, and I say, I should throw this away. And I look at it and think of the happy times we had. So I wrap it up again, put it back in another drawer by the next year. George, I want to tell you, I have saved this with no intention of giving it to you, ever. I have not sprayed it with disinfectant. I have felt it, I have looked at it, I have hugged it. I've never gotten any disease. So George, as the little Egyptian girl said, I make you happy. I think you can.
Before I open it, can we have a word for everyone? Well, thank you, Beatty.
Sewn by her little hands.
I make you happy, I open the
It's 3D bread.
3D bread.
I just wanted you to be sure it was sanitary. Oh, and it's still there.
It's an Egyptian doll, isn't it?
Pardon?
Isn't this from Egypt?
It is, I'm sorry.
It's from Egypt. I hope so.
Let's start Egypt.
Believe me, I got it. Just what I've always wanted.
Thanks. Wait till you're 8 years old for the doll. Well, I have a little story that I wasn't planning on telling if my kids could be doing. I'm much happier. So we'll go back to, gosh, I should know this, Dad. October 30th, 1974. Not exactly. It was Yeah. This is very nice. Before I went away. Me and my good buddy Jim Green, you know what it is now, had to go see The Rumble in the Jungle. Ali Foreman. We had to see the fight. So we weren't able to drive at that time, so we figured we'd get Dad a ticket. And Dad would take us to the McVickers Theater in downtown Chicago to see Ali Foreman. And we got on the train and got in the city. We're going to meet Dad somewhere. I didn't know we even had a plan. But we get off the train and there's no sign of Dad. At least we didn't see him. So we started wandering kind of around Chicago trying to find our way to McVickers Theater. We finally got there. And there's another part of the story. I'll let Dad tell it if you want to hear that. But we get in there and we're sitting down and they decided to show a movie before the fight. It was called Sweet Sugar. And it was sweet. For a 15-year-old boy, that was kind of neat to go see your first porno movie with your dad. And my buddy Jim Green, he's real happy. He leans over and he says, "Next time I want to come to a movie, I'm taking Reverend City." So it's a great night. The right guy won. We danced, all three of us danced all the way back to the train station, and I remember that night like. Long time.
I'd like to add something. We used to get together more often, I think, when we were kids. We'd go up to Naperville, and one of the things we always looked forward to was going out on rides in the car. We took Uncle George's Mercedes-Benz. I think you had a diesel. That was my first diesel. And we'd go on these hills that were like roller coasters. I don't know if you remember this, Tina and Becky and Paul, but we'd lose kind of our cookies a little bit. But one day we went by the Joliet prison, which was really impressive. And we were all very afraid that someone would escape and then hijack our car. And we all pretty much had one good question, that was, what would happen if we had a convict in the back trunk holding us hostage? And Uncle George said, he's something like this: I tell him he's back there. To a cop, if a cop ever stopped him, he's back there. And it reassured me, Uncle George, that if we had a convict in the trunk, everything would be okay. So thank you very much. I will always remember that.
Well, I was trying to figure out what I was going to say tonight about Grandpa, and Becky told me I had to come up with something. And I sat down and staring at me at this game. Uno. When I was 3, I guess started my strong relationship with my grandpa was our Uno games. And I don't know if you remember or not, but it taught me that Uno was not just a game for kids. And just because I was 3 years old, and I knew what blue and green was. But actually, after graduation from college, I got to go on a trip with Grandpa and Grandma to Italy. And it was, your grandparents are always your grandparents. They always, you go up to see them at their house, and they take care of you, and they give you Apple Jacks. But that trip was like the first time I actually got to be just with my grandparents, and out of that trip came new friends, And you guys aren't just like my grandparents anymore. And I can I could be driving down Pacific Coast Highway, Pacific Coast where I live. I could call Grandma and Grandpa and I could talk to them. Grandma will use profound language.
Which
But it's-
surprises them that I know those words.
But it's a pleasure to have friendship.
I guess I gotta follow that up. I'll just reiterate what he said. Up until I was 16 last year, I went to Germany with my grandma and grandpa, and I thought, like my brother, that they're grandparents, you know? They're gonna always be there, and you know, you go up there, you gotta eat the garlic spaghetti, you watch Winnie the Pooh on the chair when you're 15 or 16, and so going into the Germany thing, I was thinking that I'm going to be going around and we're going to be seeing all these different things and it's just going to be normal. It's going to be easy and normal. I got there and it was the biggest blowout of my mind to be hanging out with my grandparents drinking wine in a country I've never been before and thinking this is the coolest thing I've ever done. And one thing about Grandpa is that he always tells stories. You guys always have heard stories and same stories over again. It's okay. But one story that always brought, something to me was when we got off the bus at Checkpoint Charlie. There's still a little piece of the wall still standing, and already the whole group was just under emotions. And here's the wall. This is where thousands and thousands of people have been killed, and millions of people were segregated into areas. And he gets out, and I look back because I was already off the bus when he got out. He looks up at this building, and I'm thinking, what is he doing? He just goes, look at this. He goes, this is amazing. This is democracy at its best. And I didn't quite understand it until he started telling me the story of the building that he was looking at. The building had been remodeled because on one side of the wall of the apartments was East Germany, on the other side was West Germany. And what these people would do is they would try to get to the windows, jump over it, and this is where a large amount of people had been killed. And he just got out, and you could feel the energy from all these people that had been trying to get free from everything just come out in his words and his actions that he did just right then. So hard to explain it, but just something Grandpa does. It's just magic. It's all it is. It's magic.
I'll never forget the day I was 11 years old. I came home, and Mother had you virtually strapped to the wall. You had done something. I had no idea that you could do anything that would make Mother mad at you, because you were always Mother's favorite son.
Never understood that.
I noticed she was holding something in her hand, looked like kind of a group of papers. And all of a sudden it dawned on me. A couple of weeks earlier, before that, I had, and I don't know where I got them, but I had some comic books that were rather explicit. And that was pretty popular at school, because all the guys were but I didn't know where to hide them. I hid them under the liner in your drawer. That's true. Me, like you, Mother cleaned out the drawers. It was your unlucky week. She cleaned out your drawer, and she found my comics. And I don't know if you ever wondered how they got there. Nobody ever suspected me. I'm 11. But I want your mind at ease. I suspect you knew it all the way along because you got even with me in a spectacular way. when you and I made our commitment to each other in 1948, that we were going to vote for Truman. And promised each other we wouldn't tell mothers. And I did tell Dad. And he almost wrecked the car. He picked me up at 30 cents, and I told him on the road at 50. I should never have told him, because we almost killed ourselves and a whole bunch of others.
I was in that car too.
I'll tell the story. Yes, you were, and you sat there and didn't say anything. So, hard thinking, what can we do for George on his 80th birthday? So I said, okay, I'm going to admit to him what happened, which probably you hadn't figured out, when Mother really went after you. The other thing that we were so proud of the military service that you rendered in our country. And as you remember, in Indianapolis, we had a big celebration. Had the day dedicated to you, a street named after you for 5 minutes. We had newscasts claiming, this unsung hero, George St. Angelo. It was time that he got the applause and the attention that he deserved. Not that you ever wanted attention. There's a big similarity between preachers, politicians, and actors. We all have to have an audience. But at any rate, I've even been to the Pentagon, and I went to the White House about 2 months ago, trying desperately to get you the Medal of Honor. But George, all those stories that you told us, and so impressive to me, there's no corroborating evidence. And I know that you do like to be reminded of your, how many years was it? 20 years in the service. Single-handedly defeated Hitler. Had a major role in the defeat.
We didn't win until I got in.
No, wait a minute.
That's your line, dude.
I'm the one who came at the right time. And Harry Truman dies. But George has always said he advised Harry Truman to drop the bomb on Hiroshima. Harry Truman said he made that decision by himself. Bess helped him, but she was the only one. But we did find a memento for you that will remind you of your service years and your love of this country and your esteemed duty to the United States Army Signal Corps. And if, Zach, would you mind getting that big box and taking it over to George? Now, a lot of work has gone into this, George, and BD has even spent considerable amount of money getting a professional finisher in to bring it back to its luster in which it should be, illustrating the luster of your military career.
Tell them about the picture you've done.
What was that number?
On Green Street.
61 Green Street.
51,
61.
61. Doug and Pat and I were in London, and we had heard George talk about 61 Green Street when we were stationed in London so many times and so often that we went to 61 Green Street, and Doug and I posed by it and stuck our fingers in it.
And that's on the wall in my office. The highest reward I got.
Oh, no, they moved recently.
Sorry, I did something.
I just noticed when I did.
It's been confused, don't worry, it's been confused.
It's been diffused.
George, that's the box. The Chiefs have some personal belongings home. After World War II, when we were in London.
Is that right?
And we have offered it to you about 6 times. We've been trying to get rid of it for years.
Should I open it?
I don't think there's anything in it. Your name's on it because you wrote it on it.
Oh, listen, it was the biggest box. I kept John's theater things in it all those years.
It's over here today.
I've always liked it.
Here.
Oh, really? It's an antique.
Now, if I could have your attention just one more minute. You know, this isn't the only birthday to be celebrated. Brother Doug turned 70 this year. He said one word about it. It was a secret. And welcome to the club. And we want to make this a gift presentation to you. It's a book that you've always wanted. It's a book you really deserve. And it's a book that's been laying around our house that has your name in it. Christmas 1951 from Betty and George. Happy birthday.
You too.
Oh, by the way, did any of you hear CNN tonight? Senator McCain announced that he's switching parties. He's going to be a Republican. I heard first on Rush Limbaugh.
He's sort of been leading up to it recently.
I hadn't really prepared anything, but sitting here thinking about George, I was reminded of one of the only times I ever saw George at a loss for words. George has always been, when we visit, he's always been a very early riser. I think because of his world travel, he's always up very early in the morning. And one morning, I was up very early myself. It was probably 5:30 or 6 o'clock. And I was sitting in a rocking chair in the living room. We were visiting our home. And I had a blanket. I was kind of draping a blanket and rocking, and he came wandering in and seemed surprised to find me there and pleased. Somebody else was awake this early in the morning, and he stood there and kind of does his rocking when he's talking, like when we were married. You could hear in the video, the recording, George was rocking back and forth during the sermon, so you could hear. But he was doing his rocking, and he does this when he's enjoying what he's talking about, when he's enjoying who he's talking to, you know that he's involved in the conversation. And suddenly, the baby that I was nursing underneath the blanket moved, and his eyes got he turned 3 shades of red, stopped in mid-sentence, and walked out of the room. And I'm very glad that it was one of the few times that I've seen George speechless, because the first time I got to hear him speak, I was overwhelmed, and have been every time since. George is always very interesting and interested in everything that's going on, and he has added an incredible dimension to my life by being who he is and who he has raised his son to be, and he means a great deal to me. So I have a very, very small gift for you, George. It's from the bottom of my heart.
was a catcher. When I was young, I do yet, but I can't eat it because of various reasons. But I would always get a bottle of Heinz ketchup for Christmas. And that was the start, and finally Dad was getting some money in the house, and they bought me a whole case. And we used the last bottle last week. Thank you.
Well, let me try, George. George and I didn't get off to a very good start. I was born in April, and by October, he and Gordon, Mother, and Dad left me and went to Chicago for the World's Fair. I don't know who they left me. But I didn't know fairs lasted a year and a half. Well, things got better. And I am 10 years younger than George. And that's a nice spread, to be brothers. You're far enough away that you don't have any real conflicts, and close enough that you can have a good relationship. And we always have a good relationship. He tells me that he used to put me in his bicycle basket and ride me around town. I talked to Gordon about that today, and he says it was just because he was trying to make us all out. But when that story was told to me, it was very touching, and I always cherish that memory. At least that my concept of that memory. Okay. George was probably more influential in forming my values and my outlooks on life than any other single person. My politics is from George. My profession was because of George. He went to North Central and did political science, so I went to North Central and did political science. I did more with it than he did. And it was a good profession for me, and I cherished it and enjoyed it. I think the one thing that happened fairly recently, when George called from Chicago and said, Don and I would like you to lead a group of people from Wisconsin, from a family, to go to Italy. And I had never been to it, And more than that, I was scared to death. If I did it, I'd do it wrong, and then I'd be in big trouble. But we did it, and we had a good week, 2 weeks, 2 wonderful weeks together, and that will be one of the treasures I'll carry, that you had that kind of confidence.
I've got like 3 different separate stories. One's about Dad, one's about Uncle Doug, one's about Uncle Gordon, and it's like, cool. I have a letter that you wrote when I was born, Uncle Doug, when you were in Korea. And Mom gave it to me, and it's something I treasure very much. She didn't even know my name yet. I was just our little girl. And I treasure that letter. Uncle Gordon, you walked me down the aisle at my wedding 10 years ago, a couple weeks ago. And I appreciate that very much because I know that you weren't sure that you were going to be able to do it, but you did it, and I appreciate that very, very much.
That's a good race, too.
Yeah. And Dad, what can I say? You instilled the love of baseball in me, and there's nothing like going to a baseball game with your dad. And I thank you very much for it.
I want to say something also.
Wait, you need to count?
Oh, no, I'd rather not.
There's another one over there in the seat.
I'm going to borrow from Ken. Our weddings were quite a few years apart.
Just a few.
our experiences were very similar. Garlic spaghetti thing. Thank God you said that. I thought I was the only one in the world never heard of that before. And growing up Polish, German, and Irish, I'm amazed how much I got into Italian food so much that Tina's now introduced me to eating spaghetti with no sauce on it, and I actually like it. So I'm making the transformation. I thank you very, very much for all you've given to us. We appreciate it. As Tina said, baseball's been very important. The question that Ken got, I didn't get that question point blank. Instead, for part of my bachelor party, it was at Wrigley Field. Which was kind of the answer to my question. George went anyway. More than one round of beers for us. He was still there to marry me and Tina a couple days later. I appreciate it so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you for taking me to ball.
My relationship with Uncle George has been built around two things, food and travel. For 2 years, although Mother and Dad made it possible for me to get to go to Europe, and I'll never be able to thank them enough for that. You put everything together, and it was really great. I've learned more and taken more of that back with me. I can't do it either. And probably has stuck with me more than anything in my life, and I appreciate that very much. And I've always looked to you for advice on travel and so forth. You were very helpful to me when I was leading or helping kids and folks get through Paris. I remember being robbed one night, and you came to my rescue the very next day. Took me out and fed me a great meal. It was the only meal I had. And but one time, Becky and I were, now you're crying good. Becky and I were on a trip together, and George grabbed us in Rome, and we went, or Florence, one of the two, and we went out to the Mediterranean for a bite to eat. He took us to a fabulous restaurant on the top of this hill that was not too far away on the Mediterranean Sea.
Sunset.
It was fantastic, and it was the only place that I had ever had fish that were alive. We walked in, and dead when they hit our plate. And now that was a relationship. So for all of that, I very much appreciate it, and thank you. And we'll have never, ever forgotten you for all of that.
Well, I've lived with him for 51 years. And you can say, well, you have to live with him. But they've been 51 very exciting years. There have been some tough times in it, and we survived. And I heard a lady say the other day, and this is wisdom for all of us, that marriage is what keeps people together until they fall in love again. And I told Tina the other day, we fell in love again. And his card he gave me for Valentine's Day shows a mother lion with the baby lion on her back, and inside it says, "It's wonderful when the person you love is your best friend." Be my best friend.
Will you all grab something so we can do a toast? Does anybody else have something more they want to say? We can grab something.
Follow Betty after. Because George, I love you, but you're not the best. I wouldn't get by with that. 25 years apart. Like me, when, you know, right after we were married, George hightailed it for London to see And Doug and I went to Indianapolis and lived with Betty and Becky for about 3 months before Doug left for Korea. During that time, you entrusted us with some people we were looking for. And we treasured that time, even though, as I told many people, Becky spit her food right back out at me. Still, it was a great time. And then 25 years later, you and Betty led the trip, our first trip to Europe. And we're still on that. And that was our gift from my parents, was to go on that trip with the two of you. And that was such a terrific experience, which unfortunately gave us both the bad travel on. But we are grateful for that. And we had those times with you that meant so much. So happy birthday.
When you have a dad who travels, who goes all over the world, you say goodbye a lot. And but one of the things that my mom did was she never let us think that he was gone. Just for your information, people would say to her that she was a summer widow. I hated that. Dad would be gone from May until August doing trips. That was before there were jet planes. He would take 9 weeks to get over there by then. But Mom always made sure that Dad knew what we were doing, and we knew what Dad was doing, and it kept him very much a part of our lives, even though he wasn't there physically. But what he did even though we said goodbye to you in those summers, it was always a very solid relationship we had. There are a lot of dads in people's lives who say goodbye and never come back. Who say goodbye and they don't mean much in the lives of their kids, but you always did, no matter whether you were there physically, we knew you were there emotionally for us. So I wanted to say that to you. You've given us a great journey. We've loved these 80 years you've been around the sun. All of these people here have been touched by what you bring to us. You gave us the world. You've given us our best friends by marrying us. I hadn't even thought of that, Chuck. I'm so glad you did that. You've given us deep relationships and a love for curiosity and learning and to keep looking into the future. And that, sir, is my happy birthday toast. Thank you. And I'm sure you might have a few things you'd like to say. Unless someone else has anything more, floor is yours, and we have a birthday cake. And somewhere along the line, we'll probably sing happy birthday. And we also have a couple of, I'm sorry.
There's a talent that Dad has that we'll show you all later about his great acting skills.
One of the things that come to mind is that every one of you guys, except for the young ones, I can tell a story about. It's been, as someone has said, I love stories. I guess that's the reason I went into the ministry, because I like the story about Jesus. I don't know what to call him. Dad trouble. You call him Savior, you call him Lord. I just like the guy. And the stories he told were absolutely superb. But I remember one night that I was telling the kids a story. We were talking about a family that started out in New York, and they were going to go to California, and they finally got to St. Louis, and they went to the zoo, and it was a terrible day, and animals were hot, and they were mad, and they broke loose. And the family that I was describing started to run. Didn't know where to go, and they ended up on Checkerboard Square. And it started to rain. And you know, animals are colorblind, and that checkerboard just mixed up red and white, and they couldn't see where they were. And those animals crashed into the wall and were killed, and the family was okay. Becky put her head up and she said, Dad, are you telling the truth or are you preaching again? Tina, I don't know what happened one time. I fainted on the stairway. And Tina, when I woke up, I was in Tina's arms. And she was patting my head. She said, Dad, you are alive, aren't you? Wow.
We've been watching the Blackhawks win the semifinals.
And Bill was one heck of a good ball player. And in the Little League time, he was really terrific. And if he had grown up to be a little bigger, he would have made pro ball. Absolutely. But he was playing in the Little League and he pulled off a double play single-handed. Everybody was yelling and hollering, and he ran into the dugout, and everybody quieted down. And out over the dugout came his head, and he said, how'd you like that one, Dad? I did just fine. I'm not going to make comments about any more of you, but I want to thank you for tonight. I've been blessed with two very good brothers. It's unbelievable. I remember Gordon when he was in Huntingburg yet and had been involved in putting together some of the stuff down at the fairgrounds and pool. And he was showing me around. And we went into the men's room and somebody had taken a hammer or something and knocked all the plumbing to spot. Gordon had really put his life into it. And I looked over at him and he was sobbing. I don't think Gordon gave a hoot about the money. He just saw a good project for his community ruined by vandals. I knew I had a good brother. Doug is a little harder. Doug was, he's got a PhD. And I'm trying to remember just what year it was, but he graduated from Chicago University, which is a darn good school. And I had been accepted to there years ago and decided to go into theology instead, which probably was not a mistake. And Doug came by and I said, how you doing, Doug? He said, George, the president of the university just called me Doc. Gordon's got a couple of honorary degrees. I got one. We're all doctors. But Doug earned it. I had a lot of things I had planned to say, but I just want to say one thing, that we have been blessed in our crew, I'm talking about all of us here, with a tremendous tradition. And those of you who have had to put up with hearing this story because you have joined us through marriage and other ways, I just want to tell you we're sorry. And we know that you have stories. You must have so many of them that you don't tell, but tell them. I know some of your parents. I know what they've given to you. And I know what you've given to them. Tell a story. But we got a hell of a story. A German, American, Italian amalgamation. Tonight we were over at the German restaurant in Jasper, and I had forgotten how much Mom's German cooking used to be. How good chicken and dumplings with chicken gravy and sauerkraut and red kraut and the best of all, turnip kraut. That was always on Sunday. Then Tuesday would come along and it was spaghetti and meatballs And if she missed, boy, we didn't talk to her for a week. It's been a terrific amalgamation. I am so absolutely not proud of it, but just grateful that two very different cultures came together in that couple. Dad, once in a while, would get so mad, and I don't blame him. Mother was not easy to get along with. She was great. And boy, she could teach you all kinds of things in music. She directed the church choir. She had me take over when she was sick. She even told me when I was when Doug was born, she took me aside and told me that she was going to have a baby. And I thought that was great, but I forgot it. Mom was walking down the street one day, and I said, "Gee, Mom, you've gotten fat." And she got so mad. She said, "It took all my nerve to tell you I was going to have a baby, and you forgot about it?" Well, that's what happened. But that amalgamation has been absolutely, in so many ways, so great. The German side is kind of hard to love. And the Italian side is hard to hate. It's been a constant, wonderful mixture of two different ways. Dad was brought up on wine and beer and dancing and smoking, and Mom was brought up on nothing stronger than near beer. Nothing. Her dad gave up smoking when he went to the altar and was converted by an evangelist who came to. He literally told me he put his cigars on the altar and never smoked again. I'll tell you one other thing. About 2 weeks before he died, Grandpa had shriveled up into he was 88 years old, and Dad, his son-in-law, was looking after him, and the doctor told them that Grandpa should have a shot of whiskey every night before he went to bed. And Dad would literally carry Grandpa into the bathroom, take care of him, take him back to his room bed, and then go back and get a shot of whiskey and give it to Grandpa, and he loved it.
In his milk.
What? Pardon?
In his milk.
Well, maybe so. I don't remember the milk. I didn't either. I don't think Grandpa remembered it. But anyway, one time, Dad was gone, and Mother looked after him. And she brought him his whiskey and milk, and he took one sip. He said, "Wait till George comes home. He knows how to fix it." I didn't know Dad would ever take a drink until one night in Italy. He was on a trip with us, and he caught me drinking a martini at the bar. Boy, I was scared. I was 45 years old. Maybe even older, I don't know. But anyway, I dreaded going back to the room because he and I were rooming together. And so I finally decided I'd go up, and Dad was waiting for me. And he said, "Gee, George, I really want you to know if I didn't have diabetes, I'd love to have a drink with you." Boy, I tell you, I never loved him more in my whole life than that moment, because that was the kind of culture that was a constant strain that gave life tremendous meaning. It gave us an appreciation of the Catholic faith and an appreciation of the evangelical faith. It's terrific. It's helped in all sorts of ways. But anyway, I wanted you to know that. I also was going to say, I want to give thanks for those who brought us here. Grandpa Salad, terrific guy, borrowed $5 about 1890 from his brother-in-law and started a tailor shop in a little town of 2,000 people, in which his father and brother were his competitors, in which there were 6 full-time tailors in a town of 2,000. Grandpa didn't have enough money, but he borrowed his $5, and he'd buy coal and have it delivered home and carry a sack full of coal up to his shop, which we probably, I don't know if the shop is there, but we'll go by the spot tomorrow. and he would sew and so forth. And he turned that into a very, very successful operation, and finally decided he would open a retail men's store. And let me tell you, he did well. There's an old saying, it's wonderful when you can do well and do good at the same time. So Grandpa was a great influence on all of us. Grandma was too. But I remember when Grandma died, she had cancer, and they took her to Evansville, and she died there in about 6-7 days. And that was my first touch with death. My mother knew how to teach. So happened in our little town that when somebody died, you had to order a casket in those times. And it might take a day before the casket came. You had the body of your loved one in your own home. We had no funeral home. She was in state in the front room of Grandpa's house. And she took me in, and there was Grandma on sort of a stretcher with a beautiful lace cover over her face. And Mother took it back, and she told me about Grandma and where she thought Grandma was. And she said, "There is one fine lady, Judy." Covered it over, and we went back to business. Dad took me on a road. He took me, all of us, when he was in the insurance business, he'd go out and sell insurance, and we'd go with it. But remember, this was a time when insurance was just starting out. So you had to sell people on the idea of insurance, and then sell them on your policy. And sometimes it would take him all day. But let me tell you, he worked well. He worked for Mutual Life of New York, and it's what is known in the parlance of insurance in those days, an ordinary life policy company, where you just wrote the death benefit, and that was it. And that was all there was to it. Now remember, if you bought a policy for more than $3,000 benefit, you were really buying a policy. And 2 years in a row, Dad made the $250,000 Club in the Mutual Life Company and went out to Colorado Springs to be honored there with about 5 or 6 guys from all over the country. Terrific. Said, I used to like to watch him operate in the store. He knew how to do it, and he knew when to back off. He caught me one time. A man came in and he said he wanted some dress gloves. And I got out the leather stuff and all that. And he said, I can't afford that. And I must have said something about, well, you can't expect to get dress gloves for 15 cents. Dad took over. And he gave the guy, not gave, but he sold the guy the 15-cent glove. They were cotton, so forth. But to that man, that was a dress glove. And did I get it after? He said, I don't want to ever hear you belittle anybody who comes into this store or who comes into your purview. Dad even took me out and told me all about sex. Oh my gosh, I went with him down to St. Minor. We had a great time. And on the way back, he started talking about this whole business, and 95% of it was right. But he missed on a couple of things. But the trouble was, I couldn't get over that for at least 3 weeks. I never thought Dad thought about sex. Then in 3 weeks, I got to think, how did I get here? And the fact is that took courage for him, and I never will forget how much respect I got for him and for his understanding. He told me some things that later on were just not true, but that's another story. So we had a background in our family which is really something. And they brought us here, and today we went down, Betty and I went down to Huntingburg, and this evening we had dinner down at Jackson. My gosh, where they brought us up is beautiful. Holy man. Down Columbia River is the Ohio River, the second largest river in the United States. Did you know that Abraham Lincoln probably took that raft trip off of Rockport right down here, and Abraham Lincoln lived right down the street. Dad took me along with him when they were going to dig to find out where the cabin was and put a monument there. Dig to put the monument. And there was an old man by the name of Mr. Gentry, came over from Gentryville. The Gentry family is probably the family from which Abraham Lincoln borrowed the book, put it in the logs, and it got wet. And he went back and told them about all honest Abe and all that. We went down there, and the fellows were standing around waiting for the old man to come to find out where they should put the monument where the cabin was. And finally he came, old Mr. Gentry. I think he must have been as old as I am. And he was bent over and had a cane, and he poked around and poked around. Finally he said, gentlemen, I think we dig here to be at the spot. So they started digging. You know, they got down about that far. They hit cobblestones. You know where they are now? The Smithsonian. They think that they were the stones of the fireplace in the Lincoln cabin. 2 weeks later, or 3 or whatever it was, Dad had company from up in Wisconsin, and he wanted to show them about this place and so on. We went down there, and all of this stuff happened in the schoolyard. There was a little monument about that big, and the kids were in recess, and they were using that monument for first grade. Dad looked at it and he said, I believe Mr. Lincoln will like that. So we had a teaching parents. And the last thing I'd like to say, we're proud of the fact of who brought us here, but we're also proud of who we brought here. We have got, all of us, Gordon, Doug, and I, we've got terrific offspring. We married terrific girls. They knew how to hatch it. So it's been for me today a reawakening. It's an American story. We don't want to forget it, guys. Tomorrow night, I have Amy say I want to talk about the future. But right now, we've got one heck of a past. And I am so glad that I'm still around to celebrate. And if I have anything to do about it, I'm going to stick around quite a while
And you know the president had that.
The third point at supper, okay. We want to see this. We have a couple videos. One is from baseball. Tina and Steve took Dad and Mom to the White Sox, of course, baseball game, and they taped it, and we wanted to show you a little. We were going to show you the whole game, but we're going to have cake. So we're getting that queued up, and we'll cut cake, and we'll have that on the screen so you can do whatever you want to do. You can watch it if you want. You don't have to watch it. That part is over. But we wanted to make sure that we also celebrate Uncle Gordon's birthday. This was, what number was this, Gordon? 74. So could we sing happy birthday to Uncle Gordon?
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear
celebrate and tell the stories that you know along the route that we're going to take. It's going to be a nice journey into part of our past and what we remember as well.
Maggie, can I say one more thing I forgot?
Sure.
The first one of the St. Angelos I fell in love with was Doug. He was about 16, he picked me up at Vincent at the railroad and brought me home for the first time to meet the family there, and they spent the whole evening at the table talking basketball. I knew what was ahead of me. But I had my first date with Gordon. We went to hear Biggs. Is that his name? The organ. E-Power Biggs at the organ at Pfeiffer Hall at the college. But I was too old for it. So he saved me for George.
I got one more thing I forgot to do. I really built up my reputation.
Thanks.
I was down in the basement of our house and digging around for things, and I got this. It was written on October 18, 1969. And it was at the time that Gramps and Grandma St. Angelo celebrating their 50th anniversary. Let me read it to you and then tell you who it was. Dear Grandpa and Grandma, how can 8 children be so lucky? How can 8 young people end up in such a great family? How can 8 people thank 2 great people? 50 years is a long time. So much has happened to the world and to you. Though 8 of us are only a small part of those 50 years, you too are and always will be a big part of our lives. We want to thank you for the many things you have done for us, but we don't know exactly how. Words seem inadequate for the love, joys, and concern that you have given us. The best we can do is the only way man can express thanks and appreciation in a meaningful way is by loving you too deeply and dearly. And we do. In this way, we hope we can express how great we think you both are. May this golden year be a happy and wonderful one. Happy anniversary. We love you both very much, your grandchildren. Signed, Becky, Bill, Kurt, Scott, Johnny, Jill, Tina, and Paul. Boy, I'm glad I found that.
Tina, we need your help with the cake and we're just going to show videos and you can watch them if you want. You don't have to. And thank you all for this time.